And then if you've applied it on yourself and you've made it work on others, and then you've walked away to express and explain and break down the method so that others can lead others, then I think you deserve the title teacher with a capital T.
I'm here with Raphan Kebe, and we've known each other quite some time. And actually, my first meeting with Raphan was actually you walking into a workshop I was doing at Cavendish House, I think it was, with Jackie Barker at her place out near Harrow or somewhere, Ruislip. And
True.
I was really struck by Raphan as he walked in. That sort of moment when someone walks in a room, they leave an impression. I mean, Raphan has this ability to leave an impression almost before he walks in the room, which is actually quite a remarkable thing. And it was great because there was just this dialogue that started happening with us as we started to, in fact, I think before I started teaching, and then as the teaching was going on, and I remember thinking, I just want to hang out with this guy. Can we stop teaching now? Because I want to go out for coffee with him. There's a lot that we could be talking about. And stuff happened there. It was really interesting. And I thought, actually, there's a lot that we could work with each other. There's a lot I could learn from this guy as well. And I haven't really been in the sort of the learning environment with you, but you have invited me along to teach on your teacher trainings, and I've been really taken by the way that you manage the space of the group, the kind of people that you get along, and also the stuff I've seen of yours online. So
Well,
I'd
thank you.
like to welcome Raphan. Welcome, Raphan. Hiya.
Well, thank you, Gary. Yeah, that's so nice to see you and to hear. This story I forgot. I'd forgotten actually. It's true. The very first time somewhere at a workshop, I'd been meaning to take a class or workshop with you for years, and timings, as usual, has never allowed me to do so. And then that one Friday morning, I think it's was very peculiar, being able to drive up there and just finally meet you, because I was delving deeper into anatomy trains and the work with Tom Myers at the time. So obviously I wanted to see how you, of all people, were including that in your work. And so it allowed me to not only meet you as a person but also see how someone could actually talk fascia within a yoga context. And that was breathtaking, I should say,
Oh,
breathtaking. Yeah. So yeah, and thank you for having me. Yeah.
oh, pleasure. And it's great to have you here. And it's a shame that we just can't spend more time in person. I'm now living in Brighton, so we've moved back down here again. But
Okay.
my intention is to get and do more stuff in London. But
Mm.
Rafan, question to you is that you've got you've kind of broken the shackles off kind of the traditional yoga practices, and I know you're still passionate about the origins of the traditions of yoga. However, you've also found this wonderful path where you've kind of blended into something which is quite uniquely yours. And I've got to know you in the way that we've spoken when we've met, and I do see that there's this kind of there's a beautiful rebellious nature about you. It's not aggressively rebellious, and you kind of slide it in there, and you just enable people to think from a different perspective without it being too jarring to the system. And
Mm.
you land them in that place with such care that it
Mm.
gives them empowerment to do that on their own. And how did all this happen? Where did it all come from? This alchemy of stuff that you've
Yeah,
created.
that's a good question. I'm still figuring out where it comes from. I mean, something that I've recently shared with on social media actually, and I shared it publicly yesterday, um, as to the reason why I do things the way I do things is that I have ADHD, which I've found out just before lockdown. Um, and as such, I've always had this, you would call it rebellious strict, where I'm not really able to fit into the box the way most conventions would require you to. So I am a good student. I am a good student, but I've never been a good disciple. And as such, by the time I got involved with the yoga scene, both as a practitioner and as a teacher, from the get-go, it was a case of I ain't gonna do it like this. Um, and then I met, and then so that was me. And then I met some very influential people, um, in the name of Jonathan Monks, Edward Clark. Um, I would say yourself as well, alongside Tom Myers, because starting to sequence vinyasa sequences based on the anatomy trends and fascial line,
Mm.
for better or worse, has been already one path outside of the conventional linear box of Surya Namaskar, which is what most of yoga schools are based on. That was one way out. And so I'm grateful for that. And so yeah, that's how the alchemy of it internally happens to me like this, because when I study something, I cannot help but see it from different angles.
Yeah.
I also very much enjoy pedagogy, meaning that I've always been a teacher of something since very, very young. My mom was a childminder, and I was teaching different things all the time. So to me, it's always about breaking things down as to how it can be shared. And by the breaking down of things and by the sharing of things, there is a certain alchemy, to use that word again, that happens. So Space and Flow, as I've mentioned before, to someone started us off as a teaching pedagogy, as a teaching method that would use certain principles to teach Iyengar and Ashtanga and the various things that I was involved with, not fully realizing that by the time you change the way something is shared, you actually change the content itself as well, so that eventually it became a practice of its own, which is called Space and Flow.
Yes. Yeah,
Um,
so is your kind of the practice you've evolved, and I guess that's the name of your training school, your teaching school as well.
Space and Flow, yeah, 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 yeah. I 9, 10 years ago, the studio Indaba
Yeah.
studio in Marylebone opened, and the lady who's running it, called Ellen Walsh, said to me and other teachers, we want to create a place with things that are different
Mm.
and things that are perhaps a bit more advanced, a bit more out there. And so she was like, you can name your class whatever you want. Now imagine this. I'm saying that because at the time I didn't think much of it, but now realizing that it's rare for a studio, and especially a studio, they invest something like close to £1 million in it, will actually go out there and say, hey, you can name what you do, pretty much what you want, as long as you can back it up with you being consistent, with you showing up, with you taking care of people in front of you. We're giving you, and they've given me that carte blanche to really and truly just explore, experiment, improvise, be me. It didn't go without, hiccups and arguments and all of that. Obviously, no real relationships happens without conflict.
Yeah.
But now I'm realizing, like, how difficult it is speaking to teachers, how it is to do your own things. I mentor teachers nowadays as a slide. Um, um, and and I'm being told very often that the director or the manager or the owner of the studio wants me to teach it like this. And my first question is, are they teachers? It's like, no. So now you have business owners telling teachers how to teach. And that is not helping. And that does not, you know, cultivate a place where teachers can actually, as you know, explore, experiment, teach, fuck it up, and
Yeah.
actually come up with some good stuff by the making of mistakes. Because Space and Flow is just basically a sets of mistakes that I've repeated hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of time before I could refine them and find a thread and find a pattern that I could eventually explore and expand upon.
You
So yeah,
you come from kind of a varied background as well, haven't you? I mean, I think you were telling me you were a swimming coach at one point.
yeah. Oh, well, I taught many things, but I taught photography because that was my first training.
Mm.
And then I studied, I trained as a life, not life, swimming, what do you call those guys on the beach and swimming pool?
Oh, lifeguards.
Lifeguard, exactly. And through doing that, I wasn't a great swimmer, but somebody said, we've got a group of kids here coming, the coach is not there. Would you mind covering? And I was working with children, so I did, and I ended up staying for a year or two, just coaching children in how to swim, myself not being a great swimmer. And that is the essence of my teaching and of space and flow and so on is that, for me, it's a great, great saying. When one teaches, to learn.
Yes.
And it's been the case. Me coaching swimming, I was literally realizing what I was saying to them. And then my job was to get in the pool and actually practice what I was teaching yesterday. And a lot of it has been happening like this for my yoga practice, my vinyasa, space and flow. I would create a sequence, I would create stuff, I would see and react to what was in front of me. I would contextualize it on the spot, and then I would go on and practice it. The reverse of what most of yoga teacher training course would tell you to do, which is practice, 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 all will be coming, and then once you have it, you can go out there and teach. Outside the box, totally the opposite.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm going to teach you something. You're going to tell me whether it works for you. I will see. I'm going to go home and refine it. I'm going to come back. We're going to do a few mistakes, some more. We're going to experiment some more, and I'll take it from there.
And that's a
You
sign
know,
to me of a true teacher. That's really putting the work in, exploring it, working with the student, and then the student gives you the information back again. There's a dialogue in that, and I think that's such an important place. And then it's not one person better than the other. You've got two equals working with each other, and then you're bouncing the
yeah,
ideas.
totally. I didn't realize that as I was doing it, and especially nowadays that there's a lot of talk of hierarchy and patriarchal this and patriarchal that. And but for me, education was always a two-way street. Now, don't get me wrong. Um, I like to say politely to people, your ignorance is not as valuable as my knowledge, and the same for myself and a teacher. So it doesn't mean that we are at the same level all the time. That would be a lie as far as I'm concerned. However, I dislike the you come, you sit down, you listen to me speak at you, you know nothing and I know everything, and this is where we're going from. Most of my teaching is based on here is what I'm working with. I am going to share some of my growth with you.
Mm.
What's your take on it? So I ask questions all the time. As you mentioned, you didn't take a class with me yet, but I am one of those questions where those teachers, I ask questions. And Gary, it's always very interesting to see yoga practitioners not knowing what to do with the questions because most of them are not used to it. Are you seriously asking me what I think about my practice?
Well, I find,
And
when when you invite me along to teach on your teacher trainings, and I think where you and I we really kind of jive together is that, as you've seen, I'll sit down and I'll ask the group what it is. Then we've got a dialogue. I've got if everyone shuts up and they're not going to say anything, at least I know where I'm going to take it.
yeah,
But it becomes led by the group, and with your group, because you generate that level of curiosity in them, it's wonderful. Because the moment I love working with your groups, because I sit there with them and I know we're gonna kind of get in there and start pulling things apart together. And
mm,
they just look to me to kind of help guide them with that. And it's the
yeah.
same what you do. But yeah, you're right. I've been in certain situations where I ask the question and they kind of look around, is he talking to me? It's really interesting.
Yeah, you've used the key word early on. You said empowering, which is a concept I really, really like. And to empower people, uh, practically speaking, at times means putting them on the spot,
Mm.
making them realize, and everyone else around, that they are actually capable of asking questions at least,
Yes.
because asking questions implies you don't know.
Mm.
And if you start with this little bit of awareness, then you're on the right track. And that to me is real empowerment.
Yeah.
Not victimizing yourself by saying, I don't know, but by going, oh, I don't know. And let's explore.
That's the beauty. I mean, I interviewed Robert Schleich just recently, and the beauty of Robert being, one of the world's lead fascial researchers is that he's got this beautiful, humble quality to him, where I'll be asking him a question. A lot of people expect he knows this answer, and he goes, "I don't know, but if you find something out, tell me. Then I can. I've got the team that can research it, but I don't know how that got there, or I don't know why this happens." And it's really refreshing to hear it,
Mm,
to be in that place of, yeah, I'm not sure. Some of my students get really surprised when they ask me maybe some sort of factual based question, and because the science isn't quite there with it, I could make it up, but the honest answer is that I'm not sure.
yeah,
But
not sure.
you've got your own feelings. Go in there
Yeah,
and start to explore it.
yeah, yeah. And making peace with that. And as I said, I find it's the balancing between, being confident and, as you said early on, you know where to take it to if nobody asks anything,
Mm.
because you've been there long enough and you've got a few things to speak about. But at the same time, if someone was to throw something at you, it's just like, okay, I've got something to follow here. And then I can contextualize it for people who are here now,
Yeah.
as opposed to speaking to the group last week or speaking to a projected group next week. You can speak to whoever is here now. And that I am a fan of, especially teachers who are willing to put themselves on the line.
Yeah.
I
And
think it comes down to that.
yeah, and you're now becoming more well known with your teaching of teachers as well. So you're kind of
Mm.
bringing out a quality in teachers that is, I think, quite a beautiful thing in the way that you.
Thank you.
And so what is it that kind of drew you to that, or did they draw themselves to you, or was it something that kind of merged together naturally?
I think it came naturally and organically in a sense that most of my students are teachers. So I tend to attract people, and fair enough, when you look at videos of what I do, it may look advanced, and as such, it tends to be people who already have a little bit of a background. Um, and as such, it comes to that. But the truth is, I am now at the stage where I love teaching people just off the street to really see if my shit works, basically.
Right.
Excuse my language. It's like, can I teach this to someone who doesn't know their right from their left foot?
That's the training ground, isn't it? Really,
Yeah.
out there, because it's an interesting point, that, because it's very easy to kind of get pushed to a particular place. I'll use this analogy for them. I know
Yeah.
it's not exact, but we kind of get pushed to the top of something because everyone's coming up being teachers, and they look at the other teacher. But all of a sudden, we're no longer working at ground level with everything out there on the street, and that's where my work started. That's where your work started, and
Mhm.
it was one of my clients when I had a lot of crap happening with my studio many, many years ago, and I was scratching my head and worrying about how we could keep going.
Mm.
I was thinking, we've got to do new things and different things. And he looked at me and he said, no. He took me out to coffee, this guy. And he could see that things were struggling. And he said, remember why you got on the floor in the first place. Go to the thing that started the process and where your passion was there.
Yeah.
And oh my God, rather than trying to surround it with stuff that won't really fit, go back to the beginning in yourself. And all of a sudden, this excitement started to come up. And I just started working with people at street level again.
Yeah. There's something there, I'm gonna say the purity of it all, where I mean, I've seen someone, I think it was Ido Portal, talking about a couple of parameters that he uses in order to rate teachers and their methods. And
Mm.
the case is show me your students, show me yourself, I think, number two, and then show me how you apply those things and what you've learned and how you express them. I think something like that. And I relate to that very much because taking former dancers and gymnasts, people who can already do stuff,
Mm,
and then training them in your method or in your schools and say, look, this is what my guys can do is one thing.
mm,
Um, but taking someone who doesn't know how to, who doesn't know, and I'm using this language very particular and very specifically, doesn't know how to touch their toes by, standing up and lead them all the way to a side split. There, there is something. Um, and then if you've applied it on yourself and you've made it work on others, and then you've walked away to express and explain and break down the method so
mm,
that others can lead others, then I think you deserve the title teacher with a capital T.
mm.
So that is what I am working towards. I don't think I'm there yet. I'm only 14, 15 years deep, and that's not really deep. But that's what I'm working towards.
Nice, that's really good. And you've also got a really good set of principles there. And your principles, I think, we have spoken about this in the past, and I think this is where, again, we kind of marry beautifully because the yoga practice of mine is a deep influence from Van der Scaravelli's work.
Yeah,
He was talking about breath, gravity, and spine, and you're kind of working with ground, spine, and breath.
and the breath. Yeah,
So,
the big
playing around with those same principles all the time. And, that you've seen the way I work with it. It's a very different to yours, but the underlying ideas are still the same. And what you've done is, again, it goes to this place that flows,
Mm,
space and time really
yeah.
beautifully. And so it's almost got a choreography to it. And, when I
Mm.
got you, first time I saw you with this, I just thought, well, God, this guy's really come from some profound, deep dance background, and you haven't, have you?
No, I'm a trained musician, and my background is in martial arts.
Yeah. Which martial arts was it again?
I did a lot of taekwondo, but then again, I grew up on Bruce Lee, so it was a lot of, a bit of boxing there and a little Thai boxing there and karate and judo and, trying out all those different things. I mentioned the ADHD, so that explains to me why I never stuck to anything for too long, constantly jumping from one place to the other. But it is my movement background is very much that. I'll never cut it as a dancer. I was going out when I trained as a photographer. I was going out with a dancer, and she took me to a school. At the time, I was, very vocal about wanting to become a dancer, and she took me to a class, and I said never, ever again, which was the wrong thing. But it was very raw and honest as to what it takes to become a dancer. And the
Mm,
truth is, I never had the consistency, the discipline, the work ethics to become what I wanted to become.
mm,
So I guess, I mean, to come back to your first question in terms of space and the flow and how it happened is I've always been a choreographer in the closet. So you know what I mean? I've always wanted to choreograph. I always wanted to put movement through space, playing with lights and concepts and ideas and principles and share that with others. So now when I watch some of my videos, I'm like, yeah, I'm a vinyasa teacher, but the truth is I'm a failed dancer. I'm a failed professional choreographer. So, yeah,
no,
that.
but the thing is that I can see that come through in you, and you found a way to express that through a particular medium.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
coming back to the martial arts and the music, I mean, I've got a martial arts background. I play drums and hand percussion as well, and I think having rhythm and some kind of other artistry and motion.
Mm,
I think when those things, there's a term that's being used at the moment in terms of say fascial rhythm is kinetic melody.
uh,
And I see that with you, and I think
mm,
when you play an instrument, there's kinetic melody. Your body plays the instrument, as you know, and then it's the same with our martial art. Our body kind of plays that form. We might learn specific set forms, but then, like you said with the Bruce Lee thing, he just let that go into
yeah,
different mixes. And
Yeah.
I see that in you, and you're doing the same within the yoga context, which is like a Bruce Lee of the yoga world.
I'll take that.
That's cool.
Humbly. Yeah, yeah, no, thank you. Yes, I'll take that, and I think it's what I am trying to cultivate and convey. Yeah.
And then the other thing that you have, which is beautiful, is that from being trained as a photographer, you have the eye for understanding what you're seeing from such a different component. My graphics background gave me an eye, but I see the same with you as what you have from your photography. That eye is there.
That's why I was smiling early on when you mentioned that first time and you and I hanging out and going out for coffee. Because the first time we actually went out for coffee, I was curious. I like, there's something there. And you and I have got quite a few things in common because the way you spoke in that first workshop told me something about more than 2D, taught me about 3D, your background or your ability to see in 3D. And I don't hear a lot of teachers speak from that point of view. So when you and I talked, and I was like, my background is in photography, and I tend to see shapes in space or lights, traces, I think is the term that I tend to use. I see traces in space. So when I choreograph things on my body, the truth is I'm also seeing the marks being left in space. And you said, yeah, no, I used to be a graphic designer, and I see in 3D. Hence the reason, the skeleton and fascia and everything else kind of made sense to me. It's like, oh, that's what it is. And then music, I talked and you were like, oh yeah, I'm a drummer. I was like, I play bass, rhythm section, and yeah, it all comes together in that way, I think, which is beautiful and artistic. Um, how to teach that to others, is I guess what we're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that's a deep journey and it's a deep dive. And I mean, I'm sure you get the same as whenever I'm sitting in front of a group, same as if I come to your groups, the first thing that happens is extreme nerves
Hmm.
because of the enormity of what I'm trying to bring across. And also, I don't want to disrespect the lineage of the teachers that are standing behind me that have been my teachers because they're all in the room with me. But
Sure.
bringing about that kind of 3D quality, whether it be
Yeah.
from what you're seeing and the traces that you're trying to get across to people, or my 3D stuff, that's a big responsibility, I think,
Mm.
that we put upon ourselves.
Yeah, but do we have a choice?
No.
No, exactly. So let's go with it. You know what I mean? I find power in that.
Mm.
Um, if I don't have a choice, doesn't mean I'm a victim. It means I'm actually empowered with a responsibility, and I'm up for taking it on. It's not easy every day, and from time to time, again, excuse my language, you want to fuck off and do something else.
Mm.
But at the end of the day, do you have a choice? It's like, the saying, wherever you run to, there you are. So, you, you know what I mean? It's just, yeah. So,
So with the ground, the spine, the breath, and the space and the flow, how are all those? Talk me through those for you. What is it? What does it all mean to you? All of that, those five elements there.
yeah. Well, I mean, space is in relation to time, right? And flow is in relation to space. Um, and what I mean by that is I love the paradox of, what's the distance between these 2 points? It might be 30 centimeters. What's in between those 2 points? Nothing. There's nothing. And I've always been, and that comes from my photography training. I've always loved this trippy aspect of that's so very true. We measure distance, space, the distance between the Earth and the Sun. It's giving us, centimeters, so very precise. But at the same time, there's nothing tangible to that. It's basically a theory, just like time. It's like, 2 o'clock tomorrow, we agreed on the time today simply because we agreed on it. But that time does not really exist per se. So I've always been, a bit of a geek when it comes to those things, with the practical aspect of we need to agree on a certain parameter so that we can share things and relate to those things. And by relating together, then we find a sense of being and sense of purpose that enables us to feel something. And at the same time, the flow aspect and the idea that, at least the understanding, I would say, that what can be collective can also be individual, and what can be individual can be collective. So that's in relation to space and flow for me. It's like, how can I make something that is individual to me, collective to the whole room? And how can I contextualize something that is so collective that we can then make it more of an individualistic type of method or practice? To be more precise about the space, I'm sorry, about the ground and the spine and the breath, those are parameters that I use in order to rate my relationships. And I call asanas, transitions, movements, and postures relationships. If I'm grounded enough, um, I find myself enabled, able to really do beautiful things. If I'm ungrounded, it creates, I mean, I'll put it this way, if I may. Um, the difference or the distinction between compensation patterns and adaptation patterns. There's, to me, a negative connotation to compensation patterns because eventually they'll go up the chain and just create something that's going to need fixing. And adaptation patterns, which is more the empowering, strengthening aspect where you make it work without compromising your essence, your structure, your skeletal system, so on and so forth. So the ground or the relationship to the ground allows for something steady underneath me to support the growth and the expansion of my spine. And as such, this is where I think Vanda Schiavelli was very much ahead of her time, where you are as young and as healthy as you are as your spine is. And so the ground is to me to give a support for the spine to be as to do what it's supposed to be doing. And I speak as someone with scoliosis. I speak with someone who was a bass player for 14 years, and I carried a 5 kilogram bass on my left shoulder for hours in a very bad position, very bad posture. So I'm all twisted up, and that I haven't been able to change that yet. I'm just working with it. In other words, I am myself a bag of compensation patterns. And so through that, wanting to lengthen things up and to and from a yoga point of view, from a class point of view, wanting to come out of a practice and for that, for my students to come out of a class feeling taller than when they came in,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
And that leads me to number three, the breath, which is, yogis like to believe that the breath is a reflection of the mind, and as such, the idea is that if you control your breath, you can control your state of mind. So shallow breathing, all of the place type of breathing,
Mm.
closed state of mind, closed mindset, I should say, or fixed mindset, the correlation is very much there. The expansiveness of the breath in relation to your own practice, to your own personality, to your own identity, is where the breath comes in.
Mm.
And I don't need to go all esoteric on you. I don't need to speak to you about chakras and energy this and energy that. It's just a case of, can we find ourselves in physical positions where we feel both sit bones or both feet equally grounded? Can we be at a place where the spine has got the space to be lengthening? Can we be at a space where we can relate to our breath in a way that is uncontrived, unforced, as natural as we possibly can have it? And can we stay there long enough so that it gives us some feedback and that we can then assess whether this is good yoga or bad yoga, whether the cessation of the fluctuation of the mind actually happens.
Yeah, that's I mean, this beautiful moment that I found within the practice is that, at the moment we yield enough to the ground, everything that you're talking about becomes, it's like a plant. If it hasn't got the ground to grow on, then there's nothing else that can happen.
Hmm.
And once we've got that, breath and movement, breath and spine, can start to cultivate this relationship together.
Yeah.
And this is, I mean, John Sturck would talk about this a lot. And when I first met him, is that the space at the end of the exhalation is where all of a sudden that moment with the ground is met and a free movement can start to occur. And I'm pointing here, but mine doesn't necessarily mean there, but everything stands still. Time changes completely.
Yeah.
And you've got, I mean, Howard Napper mentioned this the other day in an interview I did with him. He said it's endless time and nowhere to go.
Yeah. Yeah. And finding comfort with this uncertainty, I
Yeah,
think is then the next level up in our practice.
yeah,
Finding comfort, a very Buddhist concept, right? So nothing new here. We're not making stuff up. It's then once you get to that spot, how can we be comfortable with that space of knowing nothing as to what's next?
yeah, exactly. And allowing it to come through and not trying to control what's happening next.
There you go. And
And
that's a lot of control. And we talk often about this in my, courses and classes. It
yeah,
takes a lot of control to let go of control. That is the control I want.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I've been, this has been my kind of teaching space online for the last few months, and
Mm.
having people that come on, and also some newer people that have managed to sort of, you probably found the same. People are tracking you down now because they can find this online. And taking my students to that place, even online, now they know me. I know where I can go with them, and they're also in the safety of their own home. They're not having to worry about who's around them.
Yeah,
But
that's
also
true.
some of the newer students who are looking around wondering, what the hell does it mean to let go? And you mean I've got permission to really let go and allow a movement to happen?
Mm.
That is scary, I remember being there for the first
Yeah.
time. That was a really scary place to go.
Yes, it's true. It's true. It is scary. And which
And
leads me to go for it.
no, go on, you carry
Which
on.
leads me to really go into this aspect of the practice and teaching that I am now exploring, which is the psychology of not
Mm,
only teaching and learning, because there is such a thing as psychology of learning, but also as to what it is that we are really and truly cultivating and what are we really working with. The ability to let go, as you said, those compensation patterns, those holding blocks, they're there for a reason.
mm,
So also, as much as we want to let go and we want to give people permission and the path to let go, understanding the validity in blocks, patterns, habits, both positive and negative, and for me at least becoming a lot more gentle and a lot more patient with, the growth of new habits. The expansion of the spine is great, and finding the ground is great, but also if you've been working with a certain type of relationship in your yoga practice and you now change it completely, you have got to reinvent yourself. You have got to reinvent the story of you. And we human beings need time to adapt to new things.
and this is interesting actually, because I say this a lot, especially when I'm teaching, say, fascial anatomy to different movement people and manual therapists, is that this idea of maybe a little too much of the fascia in certain places, adhesions, densification, is that the whole idea is that it all should be released. Is that actually no, that's not
Mm.
always that useful. Some areas that are adhered are now giving stability where otherwise that might not be there. You take that away, the body's no longer stable.
Yeah.
So you've kind of got necessary adhesion, necessary restriction, and
Tension is useful.
totally. We learn off tension so much, and
Yeah.
that lovely story about if you take the butterfly out of the chrysalis, its chances of survival have been halved. It
Yeah.
needs to push against something.
Just like our bones. Yeah, totally.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I
Yeah.
see this with the elements of what I've seen you teaching and the stuff that I've seen of yours online as well. Is that there's a tension that's required to maintain the balance to get the fluidity to be free.
Yeah. This whole paradox. Exactly. Yeah, you've beautifully verbalized.
So I'm just going to back up here a moment because there's also, I mean, I know this anyway, but there's an accent. And
Yeah.
yeah, so you're originally from Paris, aren't you?
I was born and I grew up there. Yeah.
So what was your life like there? What kind of led you? Were you getting involved in anything to do with this sort of stuff when you were out there? What was happening for you in your time in Paris?
I'll see. Physically, I was very physical. I was lucky enough to do a sport every single day of the week, and where I grew up at the time, my mom only had to pay once, and I could pay. I could do five different sports.
Wow.
Again, the whole ADHD was never diagnosed because there was no need because I was physically always doing something. So Monday I would play handball, and Tuesday I'll play basketball. On Wednesday I'll have my first football sessions, and on Thursday I'll go to judo, and then so on and so forth. And then I played table tennis for a couple of years quite intensely, 2 or 3 years competing. And so I was doing that pretty much every day. So this has been my physical makeup in terms of how busy I kept myself. In terms of my interest for the body, I grew up, my dad had lung cancer. He was diagnosed in 1989, so when I was 11. And then through treatment, his spinal cord and got burnt, so he got paralyzed from the waist down, um, and got given, 6 or 7 years to live. But I grew up with my dad also having a physiotherapist coming to see him twice a day, every morning and every evening, to manipulate his joints, because the idea was that he was going to regain at some point and the ability to walk again. So they needed to keep things moving for him. So it was being manipulated every day, a couple of times. So me looking at this and watching this, or seeing this, I should say, I've wanted to be a physio. And so my interest in the body and how it works and how it functions and body mechanics, especially my interest in joints, um, came from that. Again, I didn't cut it. Through school, so I didn't become a physio back in France. And then I came here and I studied music. But at the back of my mind, it was always a case of um, at some point I'll want to do that. And I came close to it after coming back from Tom Myers KMI training. I signed up for an osteopathy degree. Only did the first year, but I was just about to actually go through with that dream of touching people for a living, manipulating their joints and going back to me being a child and helping people the way my dad was helped. And I think this is what really, you know, um, spurned that idea and interest in the human body. Interestingly enough, my mom is now, spending a lot of time now in a wheelchair. So, I'm still interested in it. Um, but I am now interested, to be fair, in the mind and how, the psychology of health and what it means. So I'm training as a psychotherapist. Long
Oh,
story short,
that's
from way back to now.
that's
Yeah.
going to be a really interesting blend with the way that you're putting your work together as well.
Hmm.
Something that actually it's really it catches me with you this, and it's quite lovely this because you have an in-depth knowledge of the anatomy. You've understood that at a level. You've been through the trainings that we both know, and then you've gone through other various trainings. And I know this about you anyway from the conversations we've had. However, when it comes to you teaching and the way you describe it, what you don't do is you don't get people trapped in the anatomy.
Hmm.
Now, you know it's going on, you can see it happening, but you don't need to use language, which something that I've done with my courses is by the time they get to the end of the teacher training, throw the anatomy away because it's not about the anatomy.
Hmm.
And it's amazing. You have a vocabulary about you.
Yeah, thank you.
It takes people
Hmm.
through that they get an experience of their anatomy, but you're not using anatomy as a language. And it's
Yes.
remarkable.
Yeah.
Remarkable.
Oh, thank you. And I must say this is both conscious and unconscious, but very conscious because I've had teachers, I've had people that I really look up to, that I am inspired by, and I'm also responsible enough and respectful enough to say, I don't like this.
Mm.
So the people that I mentioned, whether it's Jonathan Monks or Edward Clark or someone called Frey Faust, who's written the book The Access Syllabus, have taught me a lot, but they've also taught me what I didn't want to do as
Yeah.
a teacher, and the language and the vocabulary that I didn't want to use, because I, we all are human beings and we are all full of paradoxes and capable of producing nonsense, myself included, but I am still trying to be as congruent as I possibly can be within at least my own little world.
Mm.
And what I found is that the terms and the anatomy vocabulary actually tends to move you away from the sense, from the felt sense. And I am a fan of, and I need to stress this. I want to know and I want to understand. And as such, it's useful for yoga teachers and anyone else to study anatomy. That's why I think your course is amazing. Having said all of that, I am also very aware that I don't need to understand, and more importantly, I don't need to agree.
Mhm.
And I think that a lot of us are actually studying anatomy in order to agree with it.
Mhm.
You feel the need to agree with something so that you can then put it into practice.
Yeah.
And I've realized a long time ago that this is not the way about it. And there's a certain, I am pretentious. You and I have not joked about it before. There's a certain confidence about us.
Yeah.
Yes, I make no apologies for that. I am the man that I am, capable of telling you to F off, capable of crying at the same time. But at the same time, I'm trying my best to be as humble as I possibly can and to say, okay, what is it that I really and truly want to cultivate here? And do the work required to get that to that place, even if it means you dislike me. So for teachers out there, the way I've done it is I've studied enough anatomy to be able to back it up.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is I've forgotten the vast majority of my anatomy. But if yourself or someone else was to speak of QL, quadratus lumborum, I have a felt sense of it. I don't know where it originates and where it inserts and this and that. And I forgot that stuff. It's important, but it's not that important because the truth is I can sense mine as I move into a twist, as I delve into the ground, as I expand up. And I speak from this experience. And that is what I wanted to cultivate and to make sure that I don't get lost in the intellect.
Yeah.
And
No.
that's why I admire what you do because you, from what I know, and every time you came on my courses to speak, is that you are very much capable of writing a freaking book on the anatomy. You have all the knowledge and you could really show off. But look, can I be abstract with you, right? And we're artists. I am fascinated by the concept of abstraction. Not abstraction as in abstract, it doesn't mean anything, but as in abstractions, as in what can I take off?
Mm.
The line walk that I see some graphic designers do. With one line, they're able to show you a body, a certain type of motion, a
Yeah.
sense of space. That is what I'm working with my teaching. And because by the time you give that amount of space to come back to that keyword with a capital S, people are then empowered, if
Mm.
not forced, to do what is right for themselves.
Yeah.
So, I love to teach and I've worked my verbal cueing, my timing for movements and everything else. But when I know I teach the best is when I can say, as opposed to go, come to the top of your mat, feet underneath your sit bones and breathe in, bend your knees, move your bum back, lift your arms up and exhale, fold belly to the thighs, let your arms go up behind you to the sky. When all of that becomes, and
Yes.
And I've now abstracted every single one of those words and I've given you a sense of time.
This is amazing because this is what I love to do with the anatomy is like take that apart and just leave a thing. And then they have to think differently about it completely. And then it becomes an experience of movement.
Yeah,
Because there's
yeah.
language, there's no anatomical language of movement. It's all set like machinery.
Mm,
And this is the thing is that you and I both kind of we go through the beautiful struggle of trying to find language of motion that is related to the body. Every now and again, we might throw in the word spine or fascia or something, but it's not hinged on anything anymore.
No,
Just instinct.
no, on experience itself.
Yeah.
So there's the work for us, I believe, as teachers, and that's what I'm now training space and flow teachers. Sorry. Um, and this is what I'm trying to convey, which is my next work. How do I convey this to others and give them the felt sense, but also the confidence to go at a place where they reduce to the point where you find just the essence of what you want to say, and you can not only get people to move a certain ways, but you can enable people to find their own way
Mm-hmm.
within a very strong structures that is the one that you've given them. That is what turns me on, and that's why I keep teaching, even though from time to time I feel like doing something else. So abstraction.
Yeah.
Um, Now we're both trainers, so I think it's worth mentioning also that yes, I studied anatomy. Yes, I've learned my skills. I've learned to deliver and teach sun salutations, normal, linear stuff, and one has got to go through the that stuff. I haven't yet found a way to do away with the basics. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And I say that because I'm often contacted by people, teachers who have been teaching for 1 or 2 or 3 years and want to already create their own styles and want to create their own vocabulary. And it's a case of I may look to you as if I've invented my own wheel, but actually I am just building upon the same wheel that we are all walking with.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just like anyone who really knows their sensitizations will be able to look at any of most of my sequences, most of them, and say, I see a sensitization in that.
Mm.
And that the truth is, I'm not pretentious saying that, it's just a fact. There's not that many yoga teachers or yoga practitioners who are yet at a level where they can look and say, oh, yeah, that. So, interestingly, I sometimes get a bit of, you know, interesting feedback, especially on social media, where people are very quick to be well intentioned and tell you this and that. And that tells me straight away, just like if you want to speak to me about yoga structure and you take one of my sequences as an example as to what not to do in order to be a real yoga vinyasa practitioner, it tells me that you haven't understood shit. You know what I mean? It's like, let's talk about jazz. It's like you're listening. I'm here perhaps comparing myself to, as you can see, John Coltrane over there and Miles Davis on the other side. Those are the people that I look up to, and I am not yet at the point where I'm calling myself the John Coltrane of yoga because I think there are people already at that level. Jonathan Monks is right there. But the idea is this: John Coltrane, Miles Davis, thousands of hours working their scales, their arpeggios, and everything else to the point where eventually they can do away with it.
Yes.
And that is what I believe Vinyasa is capable of doing as well. So I do away with the main structure, shape, frame, but trust me, it's still very much there. You know,
That's,
so when, you know,
that's
yeah.
yeah, that's beautiful, and it's just reminding me of something that Diane Long, who'd been my original teacher, because Diane spent about 30 years pretty much every day with Vanda Scaravelli.
Mm,
And Diane said, you know, what Vanda did for her is that she took away her practice and just left her with a raw nervous system. And it came from there. And then you see Diane, and it's like, oh my God, there's something happening with her in movement that you might see a pose that you recognize in the book appear, but then as quickly as it appears, it's like smoke, it disappears and becomes something else.
yeah.
And you know, it's like, whoa, okay, I thought I knew some stuff in my practice, but now there's another depth that I didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
You know, and you got to fall into that backwards.
Yeah, yeah, you have no choice, right? You got to delve into it, and it's I understand it's scary as a practitioner, and as a teacher, because it's what you said early on. You want to stay connected to the streets, because then otherwise you just then I play free jazz, and only free jazz players can listen to me, you know, and you know what I mean? So sometimes I gotta teach those 60 minutes classes where I just simplify everything without being too artistic or too philosophical about it. And I teach the sensitization and I just introduce one, two, maximum three principles. That might even be too much. One or two principles to just get a hint, give them a hint to give them a sense of what it could be like and just leave it at that. But as you know, abstractions takes years and years and years to just realize what is there to be left. And because most of our job at this stage is what to take out and what not to say.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Amazing.
in the silence.
Amazing. So, just to sort of come to a close here. So, what is it? You know, what's next for you then? I mean, Kevin, we're still in this kind of weird era now because it seems like there's another sort of mild lockdown thing happening. So we're not kind of breaking out of our spaces as that way. But you know, what's next for you? What's your plans? What you're going to be doing with your work?
Yeah. Well, I am in a process of creating online on-demand classes. And that's been a very challenging thing because I've videoed the sequences and now I'm putting my voice on it. And coming back to this concept of abstraction, okay, the context is I have a split second to tell them to do one thing. I need to now really think some more about what is it that I want to see on that video that's going to be replayed many times. Um, so I am refining my language yet again, going back to the right linguistics for what I want to cultivate. And it's beautiful, but it's challenging. And so I'm doing that for 12 classes. And because, as you know, I like to stretch myself out, I want those 12 classes to be translated and have voices in 12 different languages.
Wow.
So that's my plan and that's my goal and my next big project with Space and Flow. Number one, this. Number two, Space and Flow teacher training course, where now for the first time I'm training teachers to teach what I teach. But the big one is those 12 classes. I'm gonna do the English and the French, and then I'm gonna have someone voicing the cues in Portuguese, Italian, Spanish, Arabic, Farsi, Russian, Ukrainian, Mandarin or Cantonese as well, and then there's a 12th one I always forget.
Amazing.
And I just then want to see with that,
Mm.
what is the feedback I'm going to get, you
Yeah, because
know?
Sharon, my wife, she's from Brazil, and I've been learning Portuguese and Brazilian Portuguese, and I'm realizing, you know, I've learned certain things where, you know, there's certain words in Portuguese that just do not translate into English, and so how would that describe a movement different to the way that it would be described in English? And
Yeah.
that's really fascinating to me.
One of my on my teacher training courses, and especially the one now, I give everyone a project to do. I don't give them, I force them to do a project. They choose it for themselves. And one of my trainees right now, she's a teacher based in Cairo, in Egypt, and she's literally compiling the language of somatic awareness and movement into Arabic.
Wow.
And it's a challenge in itself because as rich as the language is, it is also linguistically different.
Mm.
You say one thing, it can mean four or five different things. And we are here trying to convey a very directional sense of movement, but at the same time, leaving space for the interpretation to happen. And it's easy to verbalize like this, but the truth is, from one language to the other, with it's not just language, it's linguistics. It's how we hear sound and how we make sense of what's been told to us. And so she's delving into that and doing some research and teaching and doing a lot of translation work and inviting other teachers from other disciplines to convey what is it they're trying to do, because what's happening in at least in the Arabic world is that a lot of yoga is talked in English. Now, Arabic is spoken by more than 400 million people on the planet. So it's so young. And so not only I'm so proud of her for taking it on, but I want in
Mm.
because then I'm going to learn more about how the mind works, how linguistics affect what we hear and what we do, and how it can affect how we move through space and how we relate to one another,
Yeah.
you know? So that's the big project.
That's a whole universe in itself. Wow,
Yeah.
that's incredible. So, Rafan, how do people find you?
Find me on Instagram and you can feel free to DM me there. I tend to be busy, you know, replying to messages and at Raphan Kebe. Otherwise, go to space-flow.yoga, which is my main website. Otherwise, rafan.co.uk. I'm the only one in the UK, so I got the domain name rafan.co.uk, which is more my personal website, and I'm working on making it good because number three in projects is meditations. I'm recording meditation tracks that people will be able to listen to and practice with. Voice work is something that I really want to get into, and again, abstraction, removing myself from the whole entity and just leaving you my voice to work with, and whatever what I say makes sense to you. So yes, thank you for asking. Rafan.co.uk, space-flow.yoga, and or Instagram.
Fantastic.
I'm on Facebook as well, but I'm not a fan of it, so I'm not there very often.
My friend, thank you. That's so amazing. I mean, we could be doing this all afternoon, actually.
True, true. But let's not. Let's just do it again at some point.
Yeah, definitely. And when we can be out there in the world again, it would be good to kind of come on, just give you a hug as well, and we can go out and have a chat.
Yeah, I didn't know you had moved back down to Brighton, so I thought you
Yeah,
were still
yeah,
not far.
so, but be back in London at some point when we can start to settle things anyway. But,
That'd be awesome. Well,
yeah,
Gary, thank you so much for your time and your questions and giving me a voice. I'm really